Good morning. It is a joy to be here with you today, and I want to thank you for the warm welcome I've received from the moment I walked in the door, and the wonderful worship service, particularly the music, which has really deeply touched me. It's wonderful to be with you. Harry was one of the ministers who shaped the way I think about ministry. Of all the people that worked to run the seminary that I attended, he was one of the kindest, the most compassionate, the most genuine, one of the ones most clearly gifted for the work of ministry. Harry was one of those rare people whose very presence makes you feel good. As soon as you saw his face, you got the feeling that maybe all really was right in the world. In order to understand the effect that Harry had on me and my classmates, you need to know a little bit about student life at Duke Divinity School. Graduate students at Duke, seminarians included, parked in the RT lot, and the running joke was that RT stood for really terrible. All standard student griping aside, it really was a long, long walk to the Divinity School. And Harry drove the shuttle bus between the RT lot and the classroom building. His bus was a refuge not only from the weather and the walk, but also from the callous uncaring or the distracted busyness that dominated so much of life as we knew it. Although he must have gotten up well before the crack of dawn, and though his job seemed to me to be numbingly repetitious, driving back and forth for hours on end every day, he was endlessly cheerful. No, more than that, Harry was endlessly joyful. And the few minutes we spent on his bus every morning did more for us than he could ever have imagined. He knew our names. He kept up with how we were doing. When one of us got married or divorced, had a mother who was sick or a congregation member who was dying, when someone was expecting a child or interviewing for a job or facing something truly unimaginable, like the final exam in church history from the Ascension to the Resurrection, to the Reformation, Harry knew about it, asked about it, shared our joys and our sorrow. He cared, truly cared about us. The Apostle Paul wrote to the church at Corinth that every Christian is called to be a saint. And Harry showed me what that could look like. Saint Harry became part of my life more or less by chance. But the very best part of my job is that I get paid to meet saintly people all over the world who are working for peace. Most of them are people who will never make the news. Yet each and every day, they work in courageous and creative ways to bring this world a little bit closer to God's intention in creation. One such person is Joao Matwawana, who served a term on our board. Joao grew up in a small Angolan village in which his grandfather served as the tribal chief. Joao was a pastor in Angola through the bitter years of the War of Independence against Portugal. He shared with us a story of a time during those years in which the church had, in his words, lost its way. Pastors had suffered so much and witnessed so much suffering that they had lost the ability to lead their people through their losses. They could only wallow with the people in bitterness and rage and grief. There was a sense that something was wrong, but no one could name what it was. Someone had the idea that the pastors and their wives, all wives in this case, should go on a spiritual retreat to regain their focus. They gathered, having called on a prominent American pastor to lead them. There's a crazy idea, eh? They expected him to get up and deliver rousing sermons to bring them spiritual consolation. But he refused, and instead kept trying to get them to talk to him. They grew angrier and angrier, waiting for him to preach healing to them. Finally, one afternoon, several days into the retreat, he suggested a time of prayer. "What do you want us to pray about?" they said testily. "Whatever's on your hearts," he said. And so they began to lift up their prayers. "Oh God, protect our boys on the front. Keep them safe. Give them strength. God, you know how much pain we feel when they hurt. You know how we suffer when they die. God, you know how much we've lost in this war. You know all about what those Portuguese have done to us." The prayers went on in this way for some time. And then finally, one of the wives said, "I want to pray for the other boys." "What other boys?" "The other boys at the front." "There are no other boys at the front." "I want to pray for the Portuguese boys." "What?" The room exploded in anger. "Why would you pray for them?" "I want to pray for them because they have mothers too." At that moment, Joelle said, you could feel something released in the room. People wept as they realized that what had been lost had been rediscovered. The pastor who was leading the retreat felt it too, saying, now we can start the retreat. As Joelle tells the story, it was that moment, that one moment, that allowed the church in Angola to regain its lost focus and to be able again to do the work that makes for peace. All because one woman claimed her role as a saint and was able to recognize that both Angolan mothers and Portuguese mothers were sending beloved boys they had borne in their own bodies off to battle. One woman's realization allowed the Church of Angola to take up again the ministry of reconciliation. The Baptist Peace Fellowship, for which I work, holds an annual conference every July. Our keynote speaker a few years ago was Kim Fook. Kim was made famous as a young girl when a photo of her running naked and on fire from a napalm bombing of her Vietnamese village was circulated throughout the world. That picture is credited with changing American attitudes towards the war and spurring the end of that bitter tragedy. Kim now works helping children harmed by war and speaking on the healing that she's found through her journey to forgiveness. She says, "I was a victim of war. I was a victim of many things, but I have found victory now that I have learned how to forgive." I was deeply excited about Kim coming to our conference, but became even more so when I received conference scholarship applications from two young men who had attended the conference the previous year and wanted to return. Those young men are Karen refugees who grew up in a camp on the Thai-Burmese border before immigrating to the United States as teenagers. They instantly recognized Kim as someone with whom they had a deep connection. One of them wrote in his application, "If you were on my Facebook page, you would know that I have many questions all the time about how to live a good Christian life. I'm also very concerned about what's happening to my Karen people in Burma. I worry so much for them and about the tragedies and terrors that they have in their lives. I want so much to help them, and I'm always searching for the best ways. I would love to meet Kim Fook and discuss with her how she found the answers and how she found it in her heart to forgive those who have hurt her and hurt her people." We were eventually able to raise enough money to bring that young man and several others from his youth group to our conference. So I wrote to the woman who coordinates Kim's travels to ask if it might be possible for her to have a special meeting with that group of men, almost all of whom who had witnessed war firsthand. She wrote back to say that Kim has serious remaining health problems and has to carefully guard her energy. She reminded me that she was going to be traveling all day on the day that which she was to speak, and that she would be very tired, and that, yes, she would meet with them. It was an amazing event for me to listen to Kim's life story and then to usher her into a small group session with 7 young Korean men who, like her, intimately knew the suffering of war. Sometime after that, one of the youth leaders of their group wrote to me to say that I had to read the sermon that one of the young men had delivered for Youth Sunday at church. I wept as I read his words. I always wanted to train in the army and be a soldier and prepare to go back to Burma and help the Korean people. But that's changed since I attended peace camp and heard so many testimonies from people such as Kim Fook about forgiveness and nonviolence and being a peacemaker. It's had a huge impact on me as a teenager, and I'm always encouraging my friends here in the Korean community to attend peace camp. I told them, you'll get a lot out of the program and the people that you meet, and they'll definitely become a part of your life and change how you react to the violence in the world. As the quote says, a pen is mightier than a sword. This quote and the Peace Fellowship have helped me to redefine what it means to be a child of God. Now, instead of being a soldier, I want to be a politician or a human rights activist back in Burma. I think he's heard his calling to be a saint. Just this past week, a friend shared with me an Advent poem with imagery so startling that if it were not from one of the most respected fathers of the church, St. John of the Cross, I would hesitate to share it with you. But because it is, and because it spoke so much to me, I want to share it. It's called, If You Want. If you want, the Virgin will come walking down the road, pregnant with the holy, and say, I need shelter for the night. Please take me inside your heart. My time is so close. Then under the roof of your soul, you will witness the sublime intimacy, the divine, the Christ taking birth forever. As she grasps your hand for help, for each of us is the midwife of God. Each of us. Yes, there under the dome of your being does creation come into existence eternally as God grasps our arms for help. For each of us is God's beloved servant. If you want, the Virgin will come walking down the street, pregnant with light, and sing. Pregnant with light. Don't you love that? But there's a catch. If you have ever given birth or been with someone who did, then you know it's a long, hard, messy process. There's a lot of work before that moment when you hold a newborn infant in your arms. We heard the scripture this morning. The wolf shall lie down with the lamb, the leopard with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. What is the way between where we are now and that ancient vision? I think it's in the other scripture that we read. We have been given the ministry of reconciliation. We are called to be saints. God grasps our hands. Not just me, because I'm lucky enough to get paid to do it. Not just legendary figures like Desmond Tutu or Mahatma Gandhi, but us. All of us. That may sound hard, even impossible. But let me close with some hopeful images. I think that the reason I was so taken with the image of being pregnant with light is that I've found myself in the last few weeks thinking a lot about darkness. In the first week after the election of Donald Trump, 437 incidents of hate-based intimidation, harassment, and physical assault were reported in the United States. Many were against immigrants, African Americans, and members of the LGBTQ community. Muslims, Jews, women, and other minorities have also been targeted. At least one Trump supporter was physically assaulted as well. Heartbreakingly, many of these incidents are happening in elementary schools, with even our youngest children attacking and being attacked. The incidents have continued to take place at a furious pace. Whether you are horrified or ecstatic or indifferent about the outcome of the presidential vote, any person of conscience must be very worried about the results of this election. And it isn't just the U.S., of course. Similar rhetoric leading to similar, often deadly results is sweeping the globe. I was recently on a call with Aziza Hassan, a Muslim woman who works with a group called New Ground, Muslim-Jewish Partnership for Change. She shared with those of us on the call that her 6-year-old son has been living in a state of acute anxiety since the election. Even though she and her husband had tried to shelter him, he picks up enough from what's in the air around him to feel threatened. And his fear isn't simply his imagination. The Los Angeles Police Department recently arrested a man with an arsenal of weapons and a map of this young boy's family's mosque. But everywhere that there is hate, there are also midwives to the birth of peace. Since the word has gotten out in Los Angeles, over 40 non-Muslims have shown up at the mosque every Friday to stand outside the worship service to keep watch. This mother tells us about having her son see these people, to remember that he is not alone in the world. They are quite literally surrounding their Muslim brothers and sisters with love and protection. In a very similar way, you have opened up this church, asking, as I understand it, for a family to support who had special needs and special difficulties in being placed. On the same call, another speaker told of a Latino church that had been attacked, someone writing harassment, spray painting on the wall, "Go back home, we're building that wall." After hearing of that, another congregation secretly came in the night and posted a banner that said, "All people are welcome in this community." So when the members of the Latino church came to worship, they were greeted by this sign, "All people are welcome in this community." And because the act was anonymous and had happened in the dark of the night, they simply called it "Our Banner of Miracles." The darkness is very real. And yet, the world is pregnant with light. And we are the midwives to the birth of peace. May it be so.